Now, I'm going to share the screen, and the first screen is going to be a real whopper. Get ready.
You want me to?
Not yet. Not yet. Almost, Aiko. Almost.
Is that it's not USB, it's HDMI, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, can you have the thing is closest to you? There it is. It's right there.
Oh, okay. So I'll move it over.
HDMI. Okay, and I'm ready.
Okay, I hoping everybody is seeing the bulletin board that greeted me on the trail the other day, on the Contra Costa Canal Trail.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, it was right there. And that reminded me, everybody likes Dolly Parton. Yeah, put it in now. So that reminded me of an episode that just happened, about a year ago. Hello, Homer, you're just in time to see Dolly Parton. My rationale for showing it is in Tennessee, just like every other place, we've had statue controversies. And in Tennessee, there was this guy, Nathan Bedford Forrest. And his statue had to come down, and it was, okay, who's going to replace? And the Democrats and the Republicans all agreed it should be Dolly Parton. And she was wise enough to say, no, thank you for thinking of me, but no thanks. So a nice moderate voice that everybody likes. I hope you all have seen the Ken Burns special on country music of the last 100 years. It's a lot about American history in that. And she is, it's a long series, multiple parts. And she had quite a long segment in there. Yes, Homer.
Well, just a personal note. When my dad was stationed in Tullahoma, Tennessee, and I lived there for a year and a half, we lived on Forest Drive, named for Nathan.
Oh, that's funny. Huh. Okay, Jim, did you have your hand up? Okay, I guess not. On we go. So
I had a politically incorrect comment on the lower part of that slide, which is a caption, I guess.
Okay.
You'd have to show it.
One more?
Yep.
Out front.
Thank you, Jim. We need that.
You're welcome. A little humor.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yes.
Did everyone else miss that? Am I the only one?
No, but maybe some of you missed another possibility of politically incorrect comment, in that it was proposed that the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest be replaced with the bust of Dolly Parton.
Oh man, we're on a roll today. Now
I'm so glad I'm not alone.
Yeah. This is when what I envisioned when I hoped this would become interactive. It took Dolly Parton to break the ice. So we owe indirectly Jim Teisel another footnote here. His son-in-law is the editor for the New York Times California edition. And they just came out, they revised their book list for the great books about California. And it just is a reminder how rich Californian history is. And I'm really looking forward to working through that. And this is their list. I thought I'd just go up, just rumble through it really quick. If anybody wanted to say something special, the Cool Gray City of Love is something that Iko and I have read, and it led to us going on a walk with Gary Kamiya, with Rudy and his wife, Debbie. Homer was supposed to be going with us, but it didn't quite work out. And Dreamt Land, we've talked about a lot, about the water in the Central Valley. East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I just can't recommend that highly enough. The history of the Salinas Valley, and we're going to encounter the Salinas Valley and River in a little bit. Farewell to Manzanar, well known to Iko. Here, I don't have anything particular to say. Octopus is about the corporate corruption of the Big Four. Palo Alto, actually by Malcolm Harris. Carol has read that and recommended it, and it's quite an interesting history that shows how much Leland Stanford influenced the development, not just of the Bay Area, but of all of California. An interesting thesis. Seasons of the Witch, what a history of San Francisco, beginning at around 1950, which was very convenient for me because I first arrived in San Francisco in 1959, having grown up in Indiana. So tales of the city, about the gay community, I think, basically. And 2 years before the mast, I'm reading that now, and I'm actually at the part where he describes Monterey. And we're about ready to talk a lot about Monterey. So I don't know, does anybody else wanted to comment on any of these books?
Well, a comment on East of Eden. James Dean was in that movie, and he was cast because I forget the actor's name who plays the father of East of Eden. That actor did not like James Dean. They really did not like each other, which gave the director the tension between them that he wanted to be on the screen.
Yes, it was Raymond Massey, if I'm
That's right,
mistaken.
Raymond Massey.
I have a comment about that movie. It ignores the major plot that was very satisfying, which is about the actual Bible quote, which is absolutely key. And it's interesting that Steinbeck put a Chinese American character in the midst of that controversy on the actual interpretation of one of the parts of the Bible of Genesis. So Shigeko, you would really be interested in that. East of Eden, that refers to the conflict between Cain and Abel, and of course James Dean is Cain. the metaphorical story. But the riddle is solved by a theological combine of Mandarin scholars and theologians. Come on, that's not in the movie, not even close.
Well, I actually thought, going to disagree with you, John, that the movie improved on the book in the way it ended. Because
Well,
as you know, the movie ends with the dying father telling the James Dean character, the Cain Caleb, to get rid of the nurse. There's a little reconciliation, just enough to give it a wonderful touch of humanity, I thought. I much preferred that to the ending of the book.
well, I think there's reconciliation in the book as well, but we don't need to dwell on we don't need to dwell on that. But it leaves out the Chinese angle, which I thought was a huge mistake. There is a mini series, East of Eden. Jane Seymour plays the mother, the very flawed character of the mother. And the Chinese American is given full throat. So if you're going to devote any time and want to watch something, look up the miniseries with Jane Seymour.
Okay.
Okay, today's New Hampshire, I'm just, I fantasized about Haley overtaking Trump. It's probably not going to happen, but the betting markets see some trajectory there. We'll see. All right, last week, Rudy asked, what's the significance of the statue with the Indian boy? Well, we didn't know it was an Indian boy. What was the significance of the boy? And looking it up, researching a little bit, the most logical explanation is that it's an Indian boy, a young boy, and it's the promise of assimilation that Junipero Serra is going to save his soul, which was Serra's a mission based on the theology of 250 years ago. That I think, and we've discussed it. Did you want to say anything more, Rudy?
No, that clears it up.
Cleared it up. Okay. And the other thing that we need to keep in mind is the Spanish were not oblivious to the issues, the ethical issues. There was this great debate called the Valladolid debate in 1550 between Sepulveda, and we all know of the street in Los Angeles, but before that, there was Juan de Sepulveda, and he debated Bartolome de las Casas. And on one side, Sepulveda took the text of the Bible and the writings of Aristotle to argue that the Spanish had every right to impose their values in the full conquest of the Indians. And I say Indians advisedly, right? I'm quite conscious I'm doing that, and if anybody wants me to explain it again, I'm glad to do it. But De las Casas's argument was the Indians were fully human, they had their own system, and it deserved some respect. Who won? Both sides claimed victory. So there you go. the other thing that we've touched on that's kind of controversial, and it came to my attention when we visited the mission in Carmel. At that time, there were chains hanging on the wall in his little cell, and whoa, what's that about? And I've quoted some authors as talking about that in more detail, and that he actually would beat himself with a rock in the chest when he was giving a sermon, for instance. But he did other stuff late at night when he was having impure thoughts. And that's where the chain came in. And there was this whole movement in the 14th century, probably in response to the plague. So we're looking at not a idiosyncratic personality trait. We're looking at history, and there's this movement. And it was engendered by this life being so bad, it's the apocalypse, and we need to do extreme things. This is a once in a 1,000-year a problem that we're facing, and that it requires severe reaction, millenarianism. We've seen an example of millenarianism with the comet that came, that was a signal to a extremist religious group that the end of the world was going to come when the comet arrived. And you'll remember that they committed a group suicide. I think there were about 20 of them. And the little village that my family moved to in 1958 in Southern California. But this event, this mass suicide, was, I think, about 20 years ago. But that was millenarian. And guess what? China has had throughout their history millenarian movements. And that's going to enter the calculation in another slide in just a second. But their history is replete with, and it's usually hats, the yellow hats, the red hats, to signify that they're members of a new extremist sect. Anyway, flagellantism has continued in so confraternities of penitents, as they're called, even into the present day. We took a vacation with my high school buddies in the Pecos Mountains, and they reenact crucifixions in the Pecos Mountains. These Catholics that are kind of stuck in time in the mountains of New Mexico. Millenarianism, the technical definition, apocalyptic timetable, and China. It's the Falun Gong is a millenarian movement, and we see Falun Gong at work. They sponsor this Chinese display of 5,000 years of civilization. And they're not tolerated at all in China. And it's for the reason that millenarian movements have caused many Chinese dynasty to fall. It usually comes at a time when they're already weak for other reasons. But there you go. Also, on a lighter note about flagellantism is Monty Python reenacting the movement in the Holy Grail. I don't know if you remember the monks hitting themselves with boards repeatedly. You can't see it here. I was thinking about showing it. 35 seconds. If there's popular demand, I'll show it next week. So this is where we're actually going to start with Serra. Anybody want to comment on that kind of discursive view of tangents that our topics have triggered? Serra has been in Mexico for 20 years, just waiting to get to the frontier to save virgin souls on the virgin frontier where Spaniards really haven't settled. This is exciting to him. This is a dream assignment. And he is eager to take the trek first to Baja, because his first assignment is to help dismantle the Jesuit missions. So that's what he thinks he's going to do, is dismantle the Jesuits and take over Baja. He doesn't know that he's going to get an even better assignment, which is to go in the unsettled territory of Alta, California. So his first, he starts off on this trek. Remember, he's 55 years old. He's got a bum leg. We talked about that last time because he insisted on walking from Veracruz to Mexico City when he arrived. And some people theorize that he welcomed the ulcer for the same reason that he whipped himself with chains. I'm going to do something a little controversial. I really rely on visual stuff to power my presentations, and it's a practice that I really got into when we were doing homeschool. That just, if I was going to teach the kids history, I just had to have something visual to talk about. I found a graphic comic, the story of Junipero Serra, but I'm going to balance it every step of the way with my favorite book. There's another book called California by John Farquhar, but this is by far my favorite book that we'll be using almost as a text as we proceed through Californian history, which James Rawls really brings to life. He was so good. He had a radio show in the Bay Area for a long time. And on the basis of that, he was recruited by Disney for what's called the California Experience in Anaheim. We haven't really tested that to see if California history comes through. Has anybody gone through that part of Disneyland? Yes, I could just reminded me that he taught at DVC, Diablo Valley College. His mentor was Walter Bean, who I think also was from Diablo Valley College. And we're quite proud of that out here. So, what does that mean, walking from Mexico? So he walks from Mexico City to San Blas. Sometimes he rides a mule, but that's not much better, right? And 580 kilometers on a bum leg. And so here's the first leg of his trip. And some of the credibility that Serra gets is just for his physical fortitude. And then the next leg, he's going to Loreto, because Loreto is the first mission in Baja, and it became kind of the headquarters of the Jesuits. So he's going to Loreto to dismantle the Jesuit mission system, which when we were talking about Father Kino, we remember that he was in charge of about 20 missions all the way up. He had started over in Sonora and was quite successful there in teaching the Indians, but Kino's gone, and the Indians there have become quite hostile. So this mission to California intentionally avoids going through Sonora and going up Baja. Baja has had problems as well as the Pecuan revolt in the 1730s, we remember. Yes, Homer.
Well, can you go back a slide, John? In blue, you've marked out the duration of the trip.
Oh,
Because-
that is on the Google Map system. I just I just but
Okay, you
it
can't
is
go
for a
700.
walker. It is for a walker. So what was it? 7 days for a
Well,
walker.
I mean, you said it was 750 kilometers. You can't do that many kilometers in 8 days. That's 100 kilometers a day. That's 60 miles. 20 miles a day is fast moving in the Shenandoah Valley for.
Yeah, but it's you get a mule too.
Come on.
I don't know. Anyway, my point actually it's a long way.
It is a lot.
So yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I didn't want to mislead people that this is modern day stuff, but the stuff that's still valuable is elevation and that sort of thing, but not the time. But I advisedly picked a walker. Now the trails weren't as good back then, but yeah, no, you're right. That's too much. Thank you. It takes a village. You gotta keep an eye on me. All right. So now he goes by a boat from San Blas, and San Blas will come in there often. It's quite near a modern day Mazatlan, which we're all familiar with. But they take a boat and then they walk up the peninsula, and he spends a year in Loreto dismantling the Jesuits. Of the Jesuits, 39 had toiled there. For 4 of them had died. 10 had been transferred to new missions, and a bulk of them returned to Europe. Then comes this guy, and this is the first time I'm using the graphic comic. Visitor General Jose Galvez, and he's a piece of work himself. He had made a reputation as a lawyer in the archives in Seville. I think we've talked about that. And he's eventually going to change everything by prioritizing stopping the Russians, but not immediately at the beginning. But he has been involved in appointing Serra to dismantle the Jesuit missions. And the graphic novel represents it this way. And he explains to Serra that Serra's going to extend El Camino Real another 1,000 miles. And for those of us who went to school in Palo Alto, quite familiar with El Camino Real. When we visit our grandkids in San Mateo, we go on El Camino Real. When I lived in San Diego, obviously. And the new thing is, okay, you're gonna do more than just tear down the Jesuit missions. You and this guy, Captain Portola, who has been governor, you're going to explore the missions from San Diego up all the way up to Monterey. And that's going to be your new task. And Rawl's comments on this moment. All right, so now I'm with the DVC historian. He says there's evidence that Galviz was insane, and that he believed he was getting divine instructions. For a while, he was convinced he was God himself. Listen, history is really interesting. You can't make this stuff up. But this one takes the cake. One of his strategies was to import 600 Guatemalan apes and use them as soldiers. Yeah. Now, Rawls, looking at this strategically from the standpoint of the United States, says this was really great that Spain came up to California, because what they did is they were not a threatening power themselves, but they served as a blocker to the Russians. Now, in medicine, we're quite familiar with drugs that work as blockers against other chemicals that can do damage. But it's an interesting concept that we really benefited from Spain foreclosing it, not just to the Russians. Obviously, the Brits were snooping around up in Canada and even as far south as Oregon, but so were the Dutch. And so it allowed us to acquire the territory after we won the War of 1846. And his conclusion was, from Spain's own point of view, occupying Alta California was impractical and unnecessary. The Spanish galleons had been built, they didn't need a harbor anymore. They could get all the way from Manila down to Acapulco without stopping. And he thought he concluded it was all the result of one unstable guy, Visitador Galviz. Visitador actually was a special title that put him above even the viceroy. That was how much power he had. And so Serra was picked because of his reputation that he had built in the field in the Sierra Gorda, where John Teisel has visited. And Rawls gives Serra credit for having courage to overcome difficulties. He points out, though, a lot of bad motives have been attributed to Serra, but in his favor, Rawls says he subordinated everything to religious duty. And as we've talked about before, he wanted to be a martyr. He was willing to die on the frontier. He'd talked to Palu about welcoming martyrdom, and that martyrdom was the true gold and silver that he was looking for in the New World. This is the graphic comic, and founding father, and of course, the California education system promotes that still, I think, in the fourth grade, unless anybody has any newer information. But the reason I'm tarrying on this episode is some people call it our Mayflower, California's Mayflower moment. That what's going to be called the sacred expedition was when California was forged, and identity is often requires hardship to forge it. You know, this came clear to me when we were in Australia, that Australia really wasn't a country until World War I and Gallipoli. That's what's their 4th of July, almost, the serving of Australians in Gallipoli against the Turks and being defeated by Ataturk, which has created a very strange bond between Turkey and Australia. They celebrate Anza Day and with mutual visits of dignitaries between Australia and Turkey. Very interesting. In the benign telling of the story, and this is true, he believed in education. He believed De las Casas was correct. They were people of raison, people of reason, and they could become good Christians. This contrasts that with the English. We talked about earlier about the French in America and how their attitude towards Indians was very different, because they didn't bring their women, whereas the English tended to. And the Spanish men outnumbered women appreciably, creating the mestizo race. Brits and Americans can criticize Serra, but we've got a lot to answer for ourselves in the treatment of Indians. He experimented with creative ways, and this would be no surprise to us. He would volunteer to reenact Christ's crucifixion, and act it out for Native Americans so they could understand it. He very much believed in introducing the agriculture technology that most of the world had experienced almost 10,000 years ago in the agricultural revolution. But the question comes up, cattle did a lot of damage. We know in the hills of California, as did other grazing animals. And we know we got a problem with water in the Central Valley because of irrigation. And the question is, what would the environment want if it had a voice? And, you know, some in the environmental movement, some think of Mother Earth or Gaia in the Greek mythological female presence. What would Mother Nature say? Are we better off moving away from being hunter gatherers? Is our future bright? So it's a complex question, and not to be answered blithely. The mission, I bring it up yet again because Jeremy Irons taught the natives he encountered in the Amazon as near Iguazu Falls as being able to learn Western music. And this is exactly what Serra did too. The difference was that Serra was a Jesuit, and I'm sorry, the reverse. Jeremy Irons was a Jesuit, and Serra was a Franciscan. All right. And as John Tyso experienced, he built churches out of stone, and we saw some of those pictures. The ongoing problem is the missions were one of a triumvirate. The second institution was the military for security, and the third institution was going to be the towns and the townspeople. In the case of the Bay Area, San Jose preceded San Francisco. Ico grew up near Mission San Jose. But the problem you got when you've got soldiers anywhere is depicted here. And Serra was constantly complaining to the military authorities about the soldiers' treatment of Indian women. Now, he's partnered with Portola. They're going to head up north and prevent the Russians from coming down. And they did. The Russians did get to Fort Ross. Their initial charge was to get back to San Diego and Monterey, because that's where Viscano had got us to, and he named both of those places. But the mission was accomplished. This is a map from much later in the 1830s, I believe. And the Russians had advanced down the West Coast, but they got through to Fort Ross, but that was as far south as they got. They were met by New Spain. And that's what this map is meant to show. The Russians had moved very quickly from Moscow. They shrugged off the Mongols in around 1500, and they were at the Pacific Ocean within about 60 years and had been developing it. And of course, their their famous naval hero was Bering, the Bering Straits. This reminds us that Vizcaino had made it that far almost 170 years before. He had named San Diego because of the festival day that was being celebrated when they arrived. He had gotten to Point Reyes after first reaching Monterey. And his description of Monterey has been criticized. He said Monterey was this great harbor, totally 100% sheltered from the wind. Not so much. We're going to see in just a minute some other problems with his description of Monterey. It's interesting in reading 2 years before the mast how Monterey develops 60 years after the Spanish return, and how much discrimination there is against Protestants on the boat. And this leads to some interesting problems. Okay, so we've covered the first two legs, and here he's going from Loreto to San Diego. That's on land 1,600 roughly, and that's a long way. But he rides part of the way. And they are meant to get to San Diego, the first leg of what's called the Sacred Expedition. And it's a complicated strategy. It's going to be a joint land-sea movement up the Pacific coast. Portola was in charge of the land. Apart, Serra was a secondary to him. He had the full authority, but he led the missionaries and had a lot of authority that came with his prominent religious place. The ships were key because they were going to keep the two land contingents supplied. So the ships made it so you didn't have to carry everything with mules and yourself. That they would be resupplied. If they could just get to San Diego, the ships would reach them there. They were even meant to be resupplied via the Gulf of Cortez, but that failed.
Minutes,
Yes.
3 minutes.
So Portola, some of us are familiar and have lived in locations that bear the name Portola. He'd been sent to Baja in 1767, and he was now the governor of both Upper and Lower. And so after he replaced the Jesuits, he was eager to get going. He had with him a scout. This is going to be the guy that's actually going to spot the San Francisco Bay. He had in his party was Serra's student at Palma, Mallorca, another one. So the triumvirate of Mallorcans are Serra, Crespi, and Palu. they had a lot of native porters in their contingent to help carry what the mules didn't carry. 63 people. So a sophisticated operation. Serra starts north from Loreto, and the first mission is where Palu is in charge at the first mission up the north. And Palu looks at Serra's leg ulcer and says, "Oh man, you're not going to make it." His leg ulcer was really suffering from all the travel he'd already taken. And here's a medical angle. He heard the muleteer, the guy that was in charge of the health of the mules. He had heard that he had been treating a mule with a leg ulcer. And Serra sent someone to say, "Hey, I want something. The people doctor is not helping me." But we know that mules are almost as valuable as humans on the frontier. So you want a good muleteer who is practical. And this is interesting because I practice dermatology. And one thing that we learned for ulcers is to keep them from drying out. And ointment, and there's some new products. There are some strips that you can cover a leg ulcer with, and you just leave it on to keep it from drying out. And one of the products that we actually gave the people with dry skin was something called bag balm. It was on our list of about 20 ointments. And bag balm is prescribed by veterinarians for udders of animals that keep on producing milk. Bag balm. And so it was some kind of ointment that eventually cured. It didn't cure him, but it made it so he could travel. And that's biblical, right? That anointeth my feet with oil. Ointments for dry skin, and also it turns out for ulcers are the best approach. There was an incident where Serra wore glasses, and in one encounter, the Indians were taken with his glasses, and in fact, it was passed around and disappeared in the crowd of Indians. And Serra had to go and retrieve his glasses later that night, but it was being used by a woman as a hair brooch. So this is where we're going to stop. This is Serra's on his way up Baja, and La Paz is number 10 down here. I'm sorry, 15 way south. Loreto is 10. And then the very last mission is a place called Velicata. And there's going to be a lot of back and forth between here and Velicata, sometimes with ship, sometimes by land. But this is going to be the takeoff base for San Diego. And remember, the Indians of Sonora are kind of hostile, and we're going to see that the Indians around here just south of San Diego are kind of hostile. Fortunately, the Chumash are going to be quite welcoming. So that's the tease for next week. Any questions, comments? Nope. Okay. That being the case, I'll sign off.
Well, just a reminder that all the Northern California missions, all the California missions, Alta California, models of them all are at the Klein Vineyard off 121, just north of Sears Point, if you're interested. They have a little building they were made for the Treasure Island World's Fair.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. Okay. I'm having a hard time. I can't visualize people. I don't know what's going on. But I'll stop this. There, that's what I needed to do. Okay, and now I can see everybody. Harold, I think maybe in a couple of weeks we'll do Yuval Harari. I want to get Sarah at least to San Diego. I'm sorry, and Monterey. So, all right. Any other comments now that I can see people? Okay. Well, thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank
Thank you, John.
All right.
Any encounters where the military had to actually
Hi, Homer.
Hi, John.
Indians?
How are you doing?
Coming along, I'm getting a MRI on Friday to see what's going on with the sacroiliac joint now. With the knee problems now,